History tells us that we've been fishing here in our streams and oceans for thousands of years. But over the last century and a half, more of us with better tools and improved technology are putting a strain on California that we all love. Today, with 38 million Californians, treating our resources wisely is an incredible challenge. Hi, I'm Tom Raftican and welcome to Real World Conservation. The concept behind Real World is simple. We hope to explore solutions to resource challenges that balance our sustainable use of resources while still ensuring a vibrant future for our kids. We'll not only look at fish, but habitat including our oceans, reefs, estuaries, and streams. And in addition to checking out these ecosystems, we'll chat with fishermen and other experts to shed some light on practical solutions that work today and yet serve us well into the future. Join us as we check out some great fishing and real-world conservation. Howdy, welcome to Real World Conservation. Tom Raftican here. Got a couple of really interesting guests, good friends, and these are repeat stars from the show, but it's been probably 5 or 6 years. Got Pete Lapidus, general engineering contractor, and Mo Gomez, South Coast Habitat Restoration. Guys, welcome.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks for having us.
Really good to have you here. Pete, before we get into what you're doing, Mo, tell us a little bit about South Coast Habitat Restoration.
Sure. South Coast Habitat Restoration. We're a small nonprofit organization based in Carpinteria, California, and most of our work focuses on the Santa Barbara Ventura region, looking to do habitat restoration projects in our local creeks. And we partner with various landowners, sometimes private landowners, as well as government landowners like state parks or the Los Padres National Forest to implement voluntary restoration projects.
Do you do all that work yourself?
Well, we've got a small team, but we work with a lot of partners that we work with, including engineers, land use planners, biologists. I'm a biologist by background, and then ultimately also general contractors like Pete.
That was kind of what I was getting to. This is Pete. I've known you for decades, I guess, a long time. Carpinteria Sport Fishing Club, past president there, and fishing was kind of the thing that we had together, and then talked about the history of construction and general engineering, and basically, what does a general engineering contractor do?
Well, we usually do public works type works, like heavy construction, whether it's bridge building or paving or grading or putting in underground utilities, stuff that you would see as you're driving around town, say on the edge of a freeway or something like that. We don't build houses, but that's the gist of what we do.
And this kind of blends in really well with where you're at. I was listening as we start up the show. You talk about California with 38 million people, and we're back to 38 million. I think we went up to 40 and it's back down again, but who knows? We've got a lot of folks here, and there are a lot of strain on the resources. And we look, South Coast habitat. That strain really shows. And Mo, what you do is try and find ways to. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but kind of fix that. And Pete fills in here, doesn't he?
Absolutely, yeah. We've definitely carved out a niche working in some of the creeks, trying to improve habitat. And some of the work that we focus on really is on trying to recover federally endangered species. Also currently under state listing process, it's the steelhead trout.
Yep.
So that steelhead trout is it's like a salmon where they're born in the creeks, head out to the ocean, and they come back. But unlike salmon, they can repeat that cycle multiple times before they die. So it's something that we've been working on a number of streams in the Santa Barbara, Ventura County region in order to try and open up habitat for this very special species of fish that used to be very common in our local creeks. Small ones including like Carpinteria Creek, Mission Creek, Gaviota Creek, to the much larger systems in our area, including the Ventura River, San Ynez River, Santa Maria River, etc. And getting a chance to open up that habitat definitely requires heavy equipment work and a lot of engineering associated with that. So we work with a lot of civil engineers and structural engineers, geotechnical engineers, and all that designing and work that ends up getting put on paper ends up getting passed on to a contractor like Pete that then has to understand what to do in order to figure out how to make that actually happen.
Get her done.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of explain. Typically, contractors that do this kind of work aren't used to working with flowing water, subsurface water, endangered species, frogs, a bunch of biological oversight. And because of that, a lot of times, if you were to hire one of your more run-of-the-mill contractors to do that, they just don't, they're out of their element. But we got into this a number of years ago, and I've always been, I grew up playing in the creeks, fishing, and I had an appreciation for that. And I think we were fortunate that early on, one of the first projects we did, I think it was the first project, we did the Arroyo Burro estuary restoration for the city of Santa Barbara. And it kind of was an eye-opener that, hey, I can have fun with my heavy equipment and do restoration work at the same time and not have to be working in a highly urbanized environment. Keep my guys busy, they make a good living, and we get the enjoyment of doing it. And I think that being the first project we did led to other projects, and because of the sensitive nature and the people that are involved with these projects, they're really concerned about having a successful project. They don't want to have any bumps in the road. And I think our track record of providing that has just led to more and more work for us.
Well, and it just blends in so nicely with what you do and how you approach it.
Yeah, it's a difficult business that we're involved with. There's a lot of layers, as Pete was referring to there, with a lot of different agencies and a lot of different species. These projects sometimes take years in the making, and anything from a landowner who's unwilling to move forward with a project can slow something up, to just the designing of a project, sometimes that are complicated in nature. And working with these types of projects as a nonprofit organization, we oftentimes apply for grant funding to do this work on the landowner's property. And so sometimes they can contribute funds, other times they can't. Everybody's in a different situation, but we're able to apply for grant funds from different state and federal agencies to bring that funding to the table in order to get some of this work done. And getting $1, $2, $3, $4 million isn't something that is an easy task, and it definitely takes a while. And sometimes we have to apply multiple times to get a grant. But we've got a pretty good track record, as Pete was saying, with some of these agencies that like the work that we've done. We show that we can get a complicated project through the design process, the permitting process, and then the implementation process in order to show that we've got a good track record to continue that moving forward and then apply for additional funds.
We talked about Arroyo Burro. You do stuff right down at the coast. You ever do anything further into the backcountry?
Absolutely, yeah. We worked on a project a couple years back in the Los Padres National Forest on a couple popular streams for backpackers to get back out there. This is on Davy Brown Creek, Munch Creek, and adjacent to the Manzano River watershed. There's a couple of pretty popular campsites back there. It's the Davy Brown Campground and the Naira Campground, where there were 3 stream crossings that had been placed in the 70s. And we, after many, many years of working with the Forest Service, were able to get grant funding to do designs, and then ultimately get those designs completed, go through the full environmental review, cultural resource assessments, biological assessments, and then get that funding from some of the high funding partners that we work with. And on that one, it included the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, the California Coastal Conservancy, as well as the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. All of those contributed funds that allowed us to really have a fun time out there. I'm happy to share that as part of my career, we were able to shut the forest down to the public in order to get Pete and his team out there to construct these bridges. And there's probably not a lot of people that can say they shut the forest down, and we were able to do that working with Pete.
I was just laughing because you're going through this list of agencies, and having worked with agencies, it's like everyone's got their own set of criteria, and it's like you have to check the box with each and every one. And Pete, this is a remarkable thing to be able to do that. I don't know if that's the good news or the bad news, but you got your hands full, I bet.
Well, Tom, that was probably the most difficult job that we've ever done from a logistical standpoint. From the concrete plant to the site where we poured over 500 yards of concrete to do those, it was a solid hour and a half for the truck to get there. We had to put retarder in the loads. We started out with 100-degree temperatures. We ended up, by the time we poured the bridge decks, it was below freezing, and we had to get big heaters and heat everything. Guys were touching the steel beams, and their fingers would freeze to them as we were putting the structure together below. And fortunately for us, everything went really well. We didn't have any injuries back there because we had a satellite link. If we had an emergency, we had Forest Service radios if something bad had happened. I think the biggest breakdown we got a flat tire on one of the trucks going in there.
That and then the squirrels were getting into.
Oh yeah, one of my trucks got totaled because we had to leave it there when we were asked to leave because of the fire season got really. And I left one of the trucks there, and the squirrels ate the wiring harness, and it was during COVID, and I couldn't get a new wiring harness, so I had to junk the truck. Oh. But the job itself was I've got to hand it to my crew. I mean, we would have to get up at 4 a.m. to drive up there. We'd work all day. We'd arrive in the dark. We'd leave in the dark.
I don't know how you guys did it. We camped out there a bunch of times, so we didn't have to drive, and it's beautiful to get back out there. Oh wow!
Yeah, and the road's horrible to get back there. But in the end, the project, I think our timing was really good because we did it on the tail end of a drought. Mm-hmm. As soon as we were done, we've had a couple wet years in a row. There were fish in the stream up there that had been holed up through the whole drought, ready to reproduce and do their thing. So we provided this natural access through there. It's a natural stream where it used to be a concrete crossing. They've got water, so it's up to them at this point to do their thing.
Well, in fact, I think I forgot to tell you, last time I was out there about a month and a half ago, we were standing on the bridge at the Upper Sunset Valley Road Bridge. We're looking at the bridge, looking at the creek from the bridge, and all of a sudden a little resident trout swam underneath the bridge from the upstream side to the downstream side.
And that was the road crossing before. So this is the work that you've done shown to be productive.
Well, and so the Manzana Creek, Davy Brown Creek goes into Manzana Creek, and then Manzana Creek goes down into the Sisquoca goes into the Santa Maria River, which I believe this year did have connectivity with the ocean with all the rain that we've had. And that's the whole ultimate goal with the steelhead restoration, is to provide connectivity with the ocean in the hopes that they will come up from the ocean, spawn, and go back to the ocean.
And because of this work that we were able to do, that migration from the ocean, it's about 31 or 32 miles that is now able to allow fish to get to these upper parts of these small tributaries that are perennial, and they have a great water source, cool water for the fish to continue their population. And it's really important because these two tributaries were not impacted by the Zaka fire that happened in Santa Barbara a while back. And so these headwaters were protected, and it's still providing that habitat for these special species that will then continue that population.
So it keeps on going, and a lot of it's because the credit goes to you guys getting this together. Was there any favorite project you have, or are they're all favorites?
I gotta say, I think that one's been my favorite project. Working with the Forest Service, there's a lot of staff that we worked with, and I gotta thank them for all the work that they did to help make the project happen as well. But just getting a chance to get out there and see the different critters that we saw out there. We had a couple game cameras set up in order to track the project, and we ended up seeing on these cameras, after Pete's guys were gone, we'd see pictures of bears going by, mountain lions, bobcats. So there's all kinds of incredible wildlife out there that it's just really cool to see that.
And then the water's flowing. We've had a lot of water lately. Pete, how's that affected your business?
Well, aside from the work that we've done with Mo, we've done work with other government agencies the last couple of years with storm damage repairs, other projects that we've done with them that are similar in nature to Mo, the Steelhead Passage projects. When we get these heavy flows, it tests the structures that we built, whether it's in-stream rocks or riprap protecting a bridge, or a lot of times they'll have us put in big root wads or logs, and when you have those high flows, it tests it. Certain things get rearranged. Sometimes things don't turn out exactly how the engineers expected, so that they look at it and wonder if they should make some adjustments. And then just private property owners that have been affected. I mean, we had the Thomas fire a number of years ago, and then we had the debris flow locally, and that really rearranged the way a lot of these creeks function. So there have been numerous projects that we've done for private property owners that weren't Steelhead Passage projects, but taking our knowledge of working in the streams and being sensitive to the potential for the wildlife that's there. We've been fortunate to be able to help a lot of people do a lot of work the last couple of years. And we pretty much spent the whole last year probably doing 90% in-stream work. So it's been satisfying, and you know, in the hopes that we're doing these bank stabilizations and other stuff, it's all part of the whole system of how the creeks work, whether it's a steelhead passage or not, and we're doing it without causing impact had there been fish there.
And I would imagine a lot of the things that you're doing now, the changes that you see that are coming about, might be helpful to the work that you're planning down the line.
Yeah, you know, when our work involves a lot of different partners, you know, the engineers that we work with, really, they're the ones that come with their expertise to figure out how to fix, you know, the problem that might be at a specific property, and getting a chance to see what's there and how it's changed over time. And again, as Pete was mentioning, the creeks are changing. You know, we're seeing a lot of creeks, you know, dropping their channel levels dropping, so it's incising, the technical term for that. So they're getting deeper, which makes the creek banks, instead of being, you know, more sloped, they get more slotted and more vertical in nature. So it makes it really difficult for the habitat to flourish in those areas, because you end up losing a lot of the native trees. You know, you got oak trees, sycamores, cottonwoods that are just washing away in these storms. And there's one property that I've been going to for close to 20 years in Carpinteria, and there's one stretch of the creek that it's doing what I just mentioned. It's getting deeper and widening out, and we've probably lost 6 mature oak trees that were about 40 inches in diameter, you know, and these were about 25, 30 feet tall. I mean, these trees are probably over 100 years old, and they're gone, and there's nothing growing next to them that's going to take their place. So one of the things we're trying to do is, can we work maybe with these landowners, bring in some grant funds to then plant some additional trees, so that in 10, 20, 30 years from now, we'll have these trees again.
Yeah, and maybe repairing a habitat that protects it from some of these.
Exactly.
That builds up there, so.
Well, and those trees provide, you know, habitat for, you know, raptors, hawks, owls, and it all, the whole system works together. You know, the hawks and owls eat the rodents, so it's not just all about the fish. Well, we're trying to, you know, keep this habitat intact. And I mentioned in the conversation we had previously, this whole incising in the creeks getting lower, I think it's a lot of function of the flood control work that they've done to catch the sediment so that it doesn't come down and, you know, harm neighborhoods. But it's a double-edged sword. It's protecting people on the lower parts of the streams where that sediment would end up, but the people directly below where these basins are, you know, if all of a sudden their creek's 40 feet deep when it used to be 20 feet deep, they're losing their backyards, they're losing bridges, they're losing mature trees, they're you know, there's a lot. So I think that we need to find some sort of balance where we can have the flood control and not have the
Is there
side
any
effects.
way we can, any key ways to move beyond that?
Well, I think that, you know, the flood control is starting to recognize this. They've notched a lot of these basins, but it's only allowing the light sediments to go through, and the basin has to fill to a certain point. So at some point we need to figure out how to let the heavier sediments, i.e. large boulders, come down also, and fill in those areas that are getting washed out. I think during the debris flow from the Thomas fire, a lot of the damage was done not because of boulders so much coming down, it was the wood debris that came down, and it found all the narrow bridges along Highway 192 and the private bridges, and it just beaver dammed those, and then it diverted the streams. So I mean, maybe there needs to be more focus on conveyance, putting in bigger bridges, raising bridges up, and allowing that material to flow through rather than trying to capture it.
It's a complicated topic, and it's definitely above my pay grade. You know.
And it's opened my eyes. I mean, you know, last time we talked, it was like, how do you fix the stream beds, you know, where there used to be road crossings? And now it's like, okay, fine, we've got that one pretty well set, but there are other pieces to the puzzle.
It's a cause and effect then. Everything you do causes or affects something else. I mean, there's no one cure for everything, and everything that you do is going to cause something else to happen elsewhere.
Yeah, we were talking before about the fact that, you know, beach replenishment, you know, when you've got these holding areas, all of a sudden the beach isn't replenished. And, you know, it moves down the coast like that. So.
Yep. No, it's complicated. We're just a small part of the puzzle.
It really is interesting to get into it, though. Mo, have you got anything on the horizon right now, or what are you looking at or working at?
Yeah, we've got another really great project that we're partnering again with the Los Padres National Forest, but this time it's in the Ventura River watershed,
Okay.
Up at the Wheeler Gorge Campground.
Oh, okay.
You familiar with it? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a beautiful spot,
Yeah.
similar to the project I referred to up on Davy Brown Creek. So there's North Fork Matilahaw Creek, and then the tributaries Bear Creek. So within the campground, there's 4 creek crossings, and for the past, 15 years or so, we've been working with the Forest Service, trying to cobble together grant funds to do this work and get designs completed. So we finally were able to complete those a few years back, and then applied for implementation or construction grants. So we got a couple grants, one from the Wildlife Conservation Board, and the other
Okay.
one from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And we're really excited about this one because there's, again, 4 creek crossings. There's 2 upper ones and 2 lower ones within the campground. The 2 lower ones are going to be removed completely, and we're going to just naturalize the stream channel there.
Wow.
And the 2 upper ones are going to be replaced with 2 clear span bridges.
Okay.
We're just finishing up the permitting on that one to get that ready, so we haven't had a chance to call Pete up yet to see if he's interested in bidding on it. But it'll be a really cool project because it's a little bit closer to the urban area, and I know the public really enjoys that campground. There's a lot of people
Beautiful
that go
place. I
visit.
used to camp up there a lot. It's a really nice area.
Yeah.
Not bad fishing up there either. So, just a question off the chart. Matilahaw is right back behind there.
Matilahaw Dam?
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
it's right.
Tell me about it.
As you drive up there, you definitely, if you veer off to the left, you would be able to go see the Matilahaw Dam. So that's a project I haven't really been involved with in my career. When I first started working in these creeks and talking about restoring habitat for steelhead, people started talking about the Matilahaw Dam, and there's a lot of really great partners that are working on that I figured I don't need to have another, I don't want to be another cook in the kitchen.
There might too many there.
You know, so they're doing a great job of trying to keep that project moving forward. Colleagues with Patagonia are working on it, are supporting that project. A lot of grant funders from different state agencies, a lot of engineers trying to figure out how to make that project happen. And I know it's coming, but before that project happens, I know they're required to do a lot of projects downstream so that they can be ready for that project and the increased flows that might be happening down in the lower
I
watershed.
imagine we'll have some, but it's interesting. That dam, we were talking about sedimentation. I think probably one of the big problems there is the amount of sedimentation behind that dam. You can't walk across it, but probably pretty close.
You're pretty close to walking
Yeah.
across it. Yeah, that's I think the challenging part of that project is what to do with all that sediment. And if I remember correctly, the idea is to try to have that metered out with storms as that ends up getting removed. So it's going to be a lot of sediment that gets washed out.
Yeah.
And as we were talking about channels being incised, in theory, this is going to aggravate the channel or build it back up in certain reaches. And
So there is some good potential news.
Well, I think we just finished a project in the Ventura River for the city of Ventura. I think the problem, and I was thinking about it when we were working down there, is that there's a very developed urbanized area below that dam. They already have a levee system to protect the residences and houses that are along there. But that river, with the amount of arundo, which if people don't know, arundo looks like bamboo grows in the river. I think that may be what Mo's referring to. There's a lot of other projects that have to happen first so that sediment's able to convey to the ocean. As it stands right now, and based on the project we just did there, I don't think the river has the capacity to take that big flow of aggregate that's behind that dam. And we're talking millions and millions of yards of material that's accumulated behind there, and to meter that out of there, it's going to be complicated. It'd be interesting to see what the final scheme is. I know they're talking about raising bridges up. They'd probably have to raise the levee up. There's a lot of things that would have to be done.
And clean out the arundo to some
And
extent.
clean out the arundo so that material can make it to the ocean.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great science that's being learned in real time, in this field of removing dams and how to address, improving habitat. And, I'll highlight the Klamath Dam removal project that's going on
I was
right
just going
now.
to say, you've got a great project up in Northern California,
Yeah.
Oregon, that taking those 4 dams out up there.
So yeah,
A big learning curve, but a lot of people involved in it. So
Well, there's something to be pointed out, and I pointed this out in the past probably on your show, and I run into a lot of people, and fiscally conservative people. And a lot of times they don't understand why the government is spending so much money on this habitat restoration and the fish work, and they're like, oh, it's just the fish, why are they doing that? And I always like to point out that all the money that they're spending is getting spent locally, and it's going to support local families, and those people are making their house payments, and they're giving back to the community. So it's being spent, in my mind, for a worthy cause. It's not money that's wasted, aside from the benefit for the habitat.
Well, habitat benefit, now, I've got a place in Florida, I spent a fair amount of time there, and you start looking at habitat restoration there, whether it's oysters or how do you improve coastal wetlands, whether it's mangroves. Those are the things that guard against coastal flooding. And we see the same thing. As we fix this with the dams coming down, all of a sudden, there's more sand on the beach, and you don't have to have the replenishment operations down the coast.
Yeah. Right.
And if you happen to live in Isla Vista and you're looking down that bluff, it would be really nice to have 100 foot of sand beach out there in front of it instead of watching your backyard falling away.
Well, the government's going to pay now, or they're going to pay later, so
Yeah.
they might as well use it on something that's going to take care of some of those issues. And that on the Klamath River up there, it's going to be really interesting, say 30 years, look back on that project and see how it all balances out. And I'm hopeful that, the salmon and the steelhead do come back up there, and it turns into a really healthy fishery. I know there's certain people that are negatively affected, but I think that the benefits far outweigh the detraction on that.
Yeah, and hopefully it doesn't take 30 years before the Tillahaw Dam comes out, and hopefully they can do that sooner than that.
So they've been working on it for close to 30.
Yeah.
But the good news is they're working on it. The good news is the pieces are starting to fall into place, and at least, like the work that you're doing, it's like there are other pieces that we have to get in line before this actually can take place. But these are all good problems. I would just like to see the concrete coming out of the dam, making a nice little artificial reef off the coast. We could little fish it out there.
Could take it on out there and drop some big chunks out there.
I'm working on it.
I mean, it's I guess you could saw the dam up and get some big Sikorsky helicopters and just fly it straight down there and drop it in the ocean.
Well, you build that river up, we'll take it down in a barge.
You could. You could shoot the rapids.
Interesting stuff that you guys do. Pete, if somebody want to get in touch with you, how can they get in touch with you and Lapidus Construction?
So we have a website. It's lapidusconstruction.com. You can Google us. It'll show up, and look at our website, and that's probably the best way to see what we do and get in touch with us. So if anybody has any in-stream projects, that's what we like to target, as our first choice for work.
Cool. Mo, if somebody wants to get in touch with you and help out with the wonderful work you're doing, how they get a hold of you?
Yeah, like Peter said, give us a Google on South Coast Habitat Restoration. You'll find our website, and any support, again, as a nonprofit organization is extremely helpful. And I know that's something that we're working on together.
I was just going to say, the Sport Fishing Conservancy, we're going to do another kind of no motor type tournament coming up first weekend in May. And it'll be downtown Carpinteria heading out, and let's do fishing and raise some money for South Coast habitat restoration.
Well, thank you very much. We look forward to being there and participating and trying to get the community out to help out with this.
Will you drag this guy along and see if we can get him out fishing?
I'll bring him along. Yeah. You might have to teach me how to tie a rod, though. So.
I need to do more fishing and less working, but it doesn't seem to happen like that.
You can't just talk about it, you got to do it.
I know.
This might be a good chance.
Well, I am going to Alaska with my son, who's in the Marines right now, in June, and is in his final 6 months of his Marines deal.
This is the life I choose.